After 45 years, Seattle returns to the West Coast Conference as Seattle and Grand Canyon join the WCC. First, a look at athletic budgets using the Department of Education's Equity and Athletics EADA database. The numbers are from 2022, 2023. Of course, I'm going to exclude Wazoo and Oregon State because as Power 5 schools in that year playing FBS football, it's apples to oranges. Of the remaining 11 schools, and of course, these budgets numbers can be skewed by a variety of factors like the number of sports you sponsor. Gonzaga obviously would have the highest athletic revenue, and Grand Canyon would be top 5 in the WCC at $30.7 million. The second row is athletic expenses, and Grand Canyon once again would be top 5 in the WCC. The third row is how much of your athletic expenses are devoted to athletically related student aid money, and the bottom row in red is what your athletic expenses look like after you isolate that student aid money. So once you remove that student aid money, Grand Canyon would have $24.8 million left over, which would rank fourth in the WCC, but slightly above them at $500,000 would be San Diego in third, but San Diego plays FCS football in the non-scholarship Pioneer League. So once you subtract that, Grand Canyon would really be third in the WCC after you isolate student aid money and then any money devoted to FCS football. Here are the men's basketball expenses, and we will include Wazoo and Oregon State for this one. Everyone in the WCC is in the top 160 nationally, which would put everyone in the top 44% of Division I. Obviously, Gonzaga has a monster budget that would rank 36th in Division I. And the WCC, majority of the league is top 100 in men's basketball budget. Grand Canyon, remarkably, would rank second in the WCC and 87th nationally, even ahead of Oregon State and Wazoo, who are operating on Pac-12 budgets. Now here's the 10-year KenPom. Gonzaga has the number one 10-year KenPom in the country. St. Mary's is 15th nationally. San Francisco has gotten really good in recent years. They're 88th. Wazoo is 111. Oregon State is 114. And then in sixth is Grand Canyon at 120th. Seattle is 194th, with their average being 200.2. However, Seattle's been steadily improving in the last 3 years, and their 5-year KenPom is quite a bit better, with an average of 162.8. Of course, Grand Canyon has also been steadily rising in the last 5 years, as their KenPom average improved from 139.8 over 10 years to 124.2 over 5 years. The NCAA's attendance records for 2022-2023 had Grand Canyon at an average of 6,564, which would be tops in the WCC. Following Grand Canyon and Gonzaga would be now Pac-2 programs, Oregon State and Washington State, and then the next two most successful WCC programs recently, St. Mary's and San Francisco. And as everyone knows, Grand Canyon has one of the top student sections in the whole country. Looking at institutional profiles, all 11 full members of the WCC are private schools. Washington State and Oregon State are only on a 2-year contract. They're affiliate members, so it's unlikely that will be long-term. Grand Canyon has a main campus enrollment of 25,000, which would be by far the largest in the WCC. Seattle is a great institutional fit for the WCC, as they would be the 8th Catholic school. Grand Canyon adds the number 11 media market to the West Coast Conference, while Seattle adds the number 13 media market. And then the bottom row is each school's U.S. News ranking. St. Mary's and Portland were regionally ranked, so I used their Times Higher Education / Wall Street Journal ranking instead. And Seattle's ranking of 163 is a great institutional and academic fit for the WCC. One factor that all university presidents are keeping an eye on is the upcoming enrollment cliff. From 2025 to 2029, there's expected to be a 15% decline in the number of 18-year-olds nationwide, from 4.5 million in 2025 to 3.8 million in 2029. And that is something that university presidents keep in mind when evaluating things like conference affiliation and who they let into their league, because they want to create any avenue possible to compensate for that big drop-off in the number of college-going students in future years by putting their school in areas that export a lot of college students. And here's the state-by-state data from the NCHEMS in 2018. That's the most recent update they have of the number of college-going students that each state exports out of state. On that chart, the out-migration column is the number to pay attention to. In the state of Washington is 15th in the number of college-going students they export out of state, while the state of Arizona is 23rd. But one thing to keep in mind is if you limit it to just Western states, since that's where the WCC is, California would be first, Washington would be second, Colorado would be third, and Arizona would be fourth. And by adding Seattle and Grand Canyon, that means each school gets more exposure in the main population center of the number 2 Western state, Washington, and the number 4 Western state in exporting out-of-state students, Arizona. Grand Canyon plays in the Global Credit Union Arena, which opened in 2011 with a 7,000 capacity, one of the best game day environments in the country. Their 6,564 attendance average would have led the WCC, of course. That's because of Gonzaga's capacity. Grand Canyon is in the number 11 media market. They would have the second highest men's basketball budget in the WCC, 87th in Division I, and they rank 120th in 10-year KenPom. And Grand Canyon has been steadily rising post-COVID as they have 3 NCAA tournaments since 2021, and they made it to the round of 32 this year, knocking off the WCC champions, St. Mary's. The WCC taking Grand Canyon continues the trend of controversial schools in the eyes of university presidents moving up in realignment if the price is right. In 2021, the Big 12 took BYU and Conference USA took Liberty. And now in 2024, the WCC took Grand Canyon. So even though there's all this debate and discussion as to whether university presidents would take what they view as controversial schools, in the last 3 years, 3 of them were able to elevate themselves. Seattle plays the majority of their games at the Red Hawk Center, which was built in 1959, renovated in 2014, has a 999 capacity, and they play some games at Climate Pledge Arena, home of the Kraken, which was renovated in 2021, has an 18,000 capacity. Seattle is the WCC's 8th Catholic school. They're number 163 in U.S. News, number 13 media market. They're the main population center of a top 15 state in exporting out-of-state college students, and that's the number 2 state out west. Seattle has a top 160 men's basketball budget, which is top 44% of Division I. They have a 5-year KenPom average of 162.8, and they've been steadily getting better with a 129, 143, and 113 net in the last 3 years. So that means two of those years playing at Seattle would have been a Q2 game. The Seattle Chieftains were the 1958 national finalists, losing to Kentucky at Freedom Hall in Louisville. Seattle led most of that game, leading until there were 6 minutes left. And Elgin Baylor spent much of the game in foul trouble, picking up his 4th foul early in the second half. So if that game wasn't effectively a home game for Kentucky and was somewhere else in the country that would have been a more neutral setting, Seattle wouldn't have been battling a sea of hostile fans, and Elgin Baylor may not have picked up 4 fouls, as home crowds by human nature tend to influence officiating. So who knows if Seattle would have pulled that off if that game was in a different location. The Chieftains could have been a national champion. A bit of WCC history. The WCC used to be named the WCAC West Coast Athletic Conference. And here's a newspaper clipping from April 8, 1970 of Seattle joining the WCAC. They were replacing outgoing Pacific. The other newspaper clipping is from about 6 weeks later on May 19, 1970. The WCAC officially voted in Seattle, and it notes that the applications of Portland and Puget Sound were tabled for a later meeting. Puget Sound was on the verge of WCAC membership at around the same time Seattle was, and that was a whole saga on its own. The UPS athletic director was strongly in favor of the WCAC but was facing resistance on campus. The Loggers had beat St. Mary's by 18 and Seattle by 7 the prior year. The resistance was rooted in the escalation of basketball costs, and the UPS athletic director countered that Seattle had actually cut their basketball budget when entering the WCAC. The football coach strongly opposed the WCAC. He said that conference affiliation should benefit all sports, not just basketball, and he pushed for the Pacific Northwest or Evergreen Conference instead. Ultimately, in 1971, the University Athletic Committee overruled the athletic director. They feared that WCAC membership would de-emphasize football and other sports, increase travel costs, and charge that WCAC schools were incompatible with the UPS philosophies. In addition to the UPS athletic director, the UPS president also wanted to join the league and was disappointed the University Athletic Committee shot down the WCAC, as membership would have meant regional TV appearances and more exposure for the school. However, the decision was under the power of the University Athletic Committee as opposed to the president or AD. And why I find this saga so interesting is because if Puget Sound took the WCAC invite like the president and athletic director wanted, and they remained in the WCC through all these years, then there's a world where Seattle never gets back into the WCC, as the league would already have a school in Tacoma, and they would probably deem that enough for the Seattle market. So that 1971 decision of the Puget Sound Athletic Committee overruling the president and AD today is probably why Seattle is now in the WCC. Seattle joined the WCC in 1971, although it was announced in 1970, and the WCAC back then had Nevada and UNLV. UNLV would leave soon after, and in the mid-70s, Portland would join. Nevada would leave and Gonzaga would join, and then Seattle was out the door in 1980, as here's a newspaper clipping from April 3, 1980, that Seattle University would be dropping down to Division III. They had a deficit of $320,000, and the following year's deficit was projected to be $400,000. However, while the original plan was Division III, Seattle in reality ended up dropping down to NAIA. When dropping out, the Seattle president was quoted, "I am concerned that in the next 5 years, we will see a massive movement out of intercollegiate sport out of the big time." That premonition would not come true, as only 4 schools dropped out of Division I over the next 5 years. And 45 years later, everything has come full circle, and Seattle is back. That is it. A lot of people have been asking about a video on the state of the WAC. I haven't had time to do that yet. I'm going to do an MVC expansion video, and then after that, a WAC, state of the WAC video.